My mother-in-law, my husband, and my sister-in-law were getting ready for a vacation in the Maldives. With a condescending tone, they told me, "You're not part of our family, you fool. Stay home." I walked away without saying a word. When they returned from their trip, my mother-in-law handed me a folder, a 10 million loan, and it was taken out in my name. I simply smiled calmly, and when I showed her what I had in my pocket, her face turned completely pale with fear. Before we continue, don't forget to write in the comments which country you're from and how old you are. Enjoy listening. The Carter estate stood like a fortress of privilege, its ivy-draped walls and sprawling gardens a testament to a family that thrived on power and appearances. To the world, the Carters were the epitome of old money elegance, untouchable, impeccable, their name synonymous with wealth and influence. But within those walls, I was a shadow, an unwelcome guest in my own life. My name is Amelia Harper, and for 3 years I had been married to Ethan Carter, the golden heir of Margaret Carter, a woman whose icy gaze could chill a room, and the brother of Clara, a venomous heiress with a smile as sharp as a blade. This is the story of how their betrayal became my triumph, a tale woven from silence, strategy, and a fire that burned brighter than their cruelty could ever extinguish. It was a crisp October morning when the storm began. The Carter Mansion's kitchen was my domain, not out of choice, but necessity. I was slicing mangoes for breakfast, the scent of coffee mingling with the faint perfume of roses drifting in from the garden. The marble countertops gleamed under the chandelier's light, a stark contrast to the warmth I craved, but never found in this house. Ethan burst through the door, his face alight with a boyish excitement I hadn't seen since our early days together. "Amelia, we're going to the Maldives," he announced, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. Behind him, Margaret and Clara followed, their expressions a mix of smug satisfaction and barely concealed disdain. "The Maldives?" I said, setting down the knife, a flicker of hope sparking in my chest. "That sounds incredible. When do we leave?" Margaret's lips curled into a sneer, her manicured nails tapping rhythmically against the countertop. "We?" she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, Amelia, you're not part of our family, you fool. Stay home." Clara's high-pitched giggle cut through the air like a shard of glass. Ethan didn't even glance at me. He was too busy scrolling through his phone, likely already picturing himself on a sun-drenched beach. The words hit me like a physical blow, sharp and cold, slicing through the fragile veneer of belonging I'd tried to build. I'd been married to Ethan for 3 years, enduring every subtle jab, every pointed remark, every reminder that I was an outsider. My parents had been a mechanic and a seamstress, hard-working people from a small town who taught me resilience, but left me no fortune to match the Carters' wealth. To them, I was a mistake, a poor girl who'd somehow tricked her way into their world. I swallowed the lump in my throat, untied my apron, and walked out of the kitchen without a word. Their laughter followed me down the marble hallway, echoing like a taunt. I refused to cry. I wouldn't give them that power. Instead, I retreated to the guest bedroom I'd been relegated to months ago, when Ethan decided he needed space. Sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the ornate chandelier above, I felt the weight of their words settle over me. But beneath the pain, a spark of defiance flickered. I was done being their punching bag. My life with the Carters hadn't always been this cold. When I met Ethan 4 years ago, he was charming, attentive, the kind of man who made you feel like the only person in the room. We met at a charity gala, where I was working as a server to make ends meet while finishing my accounting degree. He pursued me relentlessly, showering me with flowers, dinners, promises of a life I'd never dreamed of. Against my better judgment, I fell for him. We married quickly, and I moved into the Carter estate, naive enough to believe love could bridge the gap between our worlds. I remembered our first night in the mansion, how he'd held my hand and promised we'd build a life together. That promise felt like a lifetime ago now, buried under layers of indifference and betrayal. But the Carters never accepted me. Margaret saw me as a threat to her control over Ethan, her golden boy who could do no wrong. She'd spent decades orchestrating the family's legacy, ensuring every move preserved their wealth and status. To her, I was an anomaly, a blemish on their perfect facade. Clara, spoiled and insecure, resented anyone who drew attention away from her. She'd grown up in a world where everything was handed to her, and my presence challenged her sense of entitlement. And Ethan? He changed. The man who once wrote me love letters became distant, dismissive, complicit in his family's cruelty. I stayed because I loved him, or at least, I loved the version of him I'd met. I stayed because I believed I could earn their respect, that my hard work and quiet endurance would prove my worth. I was wrong. The days leading up to their Maldives trip were a parade of their privilege. They gathered in the living room each evening, sipping champagne from crystal flutes and flipping through glossy brochures of overwater bungalows, turquoise waters, and private yachts. Their voices bubbled with excitement as they planned every detail: dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, snorkeling in coral reefs, a sunset cruise under a starlit sky. I was invisible, reduced to the role of housekeeper as I cleaned up their discarded wine glasses and wiped down tables sticky with their excess. They didn't bother to lower their voices when they spoke about me. "She's so ordinary," Clara said one night, twirling a strand of her blonde hair as she lounged on a velvet sofa. "Why did Ethan ever marry her?" Margaret's response was a cold chuckle, her eyes glinting with malice. "Don't worry, darling. She'll learn her place soon enough." Their words seared into my mind, but they also fueled the spark of defiance within me. I began to notice the little things, the way Margaret's gaze lingered on me with calculation, the way Ethan avoided my eyes, the way Clara's laughter held an edge of cruelty. The night before they left, I overheard them in the study, their voices low and conspiratorial. "Everything's in place," Margaret said, her tone clipped and precise. "By the time we're back, she'll be finished." Clara giggled, and Ethan murmured something I couldn't catch. My stomach churned, but I didn't confront them. Not yet. The next morning, as their sleek black SUV pulled out of the driveway, I stood at the window, watching them disappear. The house was silent, and for the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of freedom. The weight of their presence lifted, leaving space for something new, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Hope. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew I couldn't let their cruelty define me any longer. That first day alone, I wandered the mansion, my footsteps echoing in the vast halls. The Carter estate was a labyrinth of opulence, crystal chandeliers casting prisms of light, Persian rugs soft underfoot, walls adorned with paintings worth more than my childhood home. But it was also a prison, every corner a reminder of my place in their world. I ended up in Ethan's study, a room I rarely entered. It was his sanctuary, all dark mahogany and leather-bound books, with the faint smell of cigar smoke lingering in the air. The desk was a monolithic piece of furniture, its surface cluttered with papers, a crystal decanter, and a silver cigar cutter. I don't know what compelled me to snoop. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was rebellion, but I started rifling through his desk, my hands trembling as I opened drawers I'd never dared touch before. My fingers brushed against a folder tucked beneath a stack of financial statements. My name was scrawled across the front in Ethan's meticulous handwriting, the ink bold and deliberate. My heart pounded as I opened it, the paper crinkling under my fingers. Inside were documents for a $10 million loan, taken out in my name. My signature was forged on every page, the loops and curves a near-perfect imitation of my own. The loan was tied to a shell company called Blue Horizon Ventures, a name I'd never heard before. The funds had already been disbursed to an offshore account, and the repayment terms were brutal. Default would mean financial ruin. My credit, my future, my life, gone. I sat there, the folder trembling in my hands, as the weight of their betrayal settled over me. This wasn't just cruelty. It was a calculated plan to destroy me. If the loan defaulted, I'd be liable. The Carters were powerful, with lawyers and connections that could bury me in court. They'd claim I'd signed willingly, that I'd mismanaged the funds. I was their scapegoat, a pawn in a game I hadn't even known I was playing. My breath came in short, sharp gasps as I read the documents again, hoping I'd misunderstood. But the truth was undeniable. They'd planned this, all of them. Margaret, Clara, Ethan. The family I'd tried to belong to had orchestrated my ruin. For hours, I sat in that study, my mind racing. Why would they do this? The answer came slowly, piecing itself together like a puzzle I'd been too naive to solve. They wanted control. They wanted me trapped, dependent, unable to leave. If I tried to fight back, they'd use their wealth and influence to crush me. I imagined Margaret's smug smile, Clara's mocking laugh, Ethan's indifferent shrug. They thought they'd won, but they'd made one fatal mistake. They underestimated me. Growing up in a small town, I'd learned to be resourceful. My father, with his grease-stained hands and endless patience, taught me how to fix what was broken, whether it was a car engine or a shattered dream. My mother, with her quiet strength, showed me how to stitch together solutions from scraps, turning old fabric into something beautiful. They'd raised me to be resilient, to find a way when there seemed to be none. I wasn't the fool the Carters thought I was. and I wasn't going to let them win. Over the next 2 weeks, while they lounged in the Maldives, I worked. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Meals were quick bites of toast or cold coffee between phone calls and late-night research. I started by hiring a private investigator named Marcus, a grizzled ex-cop with a reputation for digging up dirt. I used the small savings I'd kept hidden from Ethan, a secret fund I'd built over the years from the meager allowances he'd given me. It wasn't much, just a few $1,000s tucked away in an account he didn't know about, but it was enough to get Marcus on board. I met him in a dimly lit diner on the edge of town, sliding the folder across the table. "Find out where the money went," I told him, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. "And who's behind it?" Marcus was thorough, and within days, he had answers. The loan had been funneled through a series of offshore accounts linked to Margaret's brother, Victor, a financier with a trail of shady deals. The money had gone into a failing real estate venture in Dubai, a project Ethan had mentioned months ago, dismissing it as just business during a rare moment of conversation. But this wasn't business. It was fraud. They'd used my name to secure the loan, knowing that if the project collapsed, I'd take the fall. Marcus uncovered more. Victor had a history of using shell companies to launder money, and the Dubai project was a sinking ship, propped up by fraudulent loans like the one in my name. The Carters weren't just trying to trap me. They were protecting their own interests at my expense. I didn't stop there. I contacted a lawyer named Sarah, a woman with a sharp mind and a passion for taking on powerful families like the Carters. I met her in a small, nondescript office downtown, away from the prying eyes of the Carter estate. The office smelled of old books and coffee, a stark contrast to the sterile opulence of the mansion. Sarah flipped through the documents, her eyes narrowing with each page. "This is a slam dunk," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Forgery, fraud, conspiracy, it's all here. But we need more. We need proof they forged your signature, something ironclad." That's when I remembered the security cameras in Ethan's study. He'd installed them to protect his assets, boasting about their high-definition clarity during one of his rare moments of openness. But in his arrogance, he'd never changed the default password, Carter1223. I logged into the system from my laptop, my hands shaking as I navigated the footage. The interface was clunky, but I found what I needed. Dated 2 months ago, a late-night scene in the study. Clara sat at Ethan's desk, giggling as she practiced forging my signature on a stack of papers. Margaret stood over her, coaching her on every stroke. "Make the A loopier," she said, her voice clipped and precise. Ethan was there too, leaning against the bookshelf, sipping whiskey, nodding approvingly. The footage was clear, undeniable, a digital confession of their betrayal. I had them. But I knew confronting them directly would be too easy. They'd lie, manipulate, or worse, turn it back on me. They'd claim I'd misunderstood, that I'd agreed to the loan, that I was unstable. The Carters were masters of manipulation, their wealth and connections a shield against accountability. I needed something bigger, something that would make them feel the fear they'd inflicted on me. So, I dug deeper. Using the access I had to the family's financial accounts, Ethan had never bothered to revoke my permissions, assuming I was too meek to use them. I started investigating Margaret's finances. What I found was a gold mine. Years of tax evasion, hidden assets, and shady deals. Margaret had been siphoning money from the family trust into her own accounts for decades, using shell companies to cover her tracks. Ethan and Clara were complicit, reaping the benefits of her schemes while pretending to be upstanding citizens. Bank statements showed transfers to offshore accounts. Emails revealed coded discussions about discreet investments, and contracts tied Margaret to Victor's illicit ventures. I spent days compiling evidence, bank statements, emails, wire transfer records, the forged loan documents, the security footage, into a single damning file. But I didn't stop there. I reached out to an old college friend, Lena, who now worked as an investigative journalist for a major outlet. We met in a crowded cafe, the hum of conversation masking our own. I told her everything, my voice steady despite the weight of the truth. "This is explosive," she said, her eyes wide as she scrolled through the files on her laptop. "If you're sure about this, I can get it published. But you need to be ready for the fallout. The Carters won't go down quietly." "I'm ready," I said, handing her a copy of the file. "Just make sure it hits hard." To ensure my safety, I contacted an old family friend, Tom, who worked in cybersecurity. We met in a park, away from prying eyes, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. I explained the situation, my voice low as I handed him a USB drive with the evidence. "Secure this," I said. "Encrypt it, back it up, make sure it's safe." Tom's face was grim, but he nodded. "You're playing a dangerous game, Amelia," he warned. "People like the Carters have ways of making problems disappear." "I know," I said, my jaw tight. "But I'm done being their problem." As I built my case, I found unexpected allies. One was Maria, the housekeeper who'd worked for the Carters for years. She was a quiet woman, her hands calloused from years of scrubbing floors and polishing silver. She'd always been kind to me, slipping me extra coffee or a sympathetic smile when Margaret's barbs grew too sharp. One evening, as we cleaned the dining room together, the chandelier casting soft light over the mahogany table, she whispered, "I know what they're doing to you. I've seen things, documents, hushed conversations. If you need help, I'm here." Maria became my eyes and ears. She told me about late-night meetings in the study, about Victor's frequent visits, about a locked drawer in Margaret's office that she'd never been allowed to touch. One night, when the house was quiet, Maria slipped me the key to that drawer. My heart raced as I opened it, finding a treasure trove of evidence. Contracts linking the Dubai project to Victor's shell companies. Emails discussing how to handle me if I became a problem. Even a handwritten note from Margaret outlining the plan to pin the loan on me. Each piece was another weapon in my arsenal, another step toward justice. Another ally was my mother, who I called late one night, my voice breaking as I told her everything. I sat on the floor of the guest bedroom, the phone pressed to my ear, the mansion's silence pressing in around me. "You're stronger than they know," she said, her voice steady and warm. You always have been. Don't let them break you. Her words became my anchor, grounding me as I navigated the storm. I thought of her hands, worn from years of sewing, and my father's, stained with engine grease. They'd taught me to fight, not with fists, but with cunning, with resilience, with the kind of quiet strength that outlasts cruelty. I also found an unexpected ally in James, a junior accountant at the Carter family's firm. I'd met him a few times at company events, where he'd always been polite, unlike the other employees who treated me like an extension of the furniture. I reached out to him, meeting in a quiet bookstore where the smell of paper and ink felt like a refuge. I told him about the loan, about the fraud, about my suspicions. His face paled, but he nodded. I've seen discrepancies in the books, he admitted. Transactions that didn't add up, accounts I wasn't allowed to touch. If you're right, I can help you find more. James became my inside man, slipping me copies of financial records that confirmed Margaret's schemes. He found evidence of additional loans taken out in the names of other unsuspecting employees, a pattern of fraud that stretched back years. They've been doing this for a long time, he said, his voice low. You're not the first, but you might be the one to stop them. With each piece of evidence, my plan grew stronger. I spent late nights in the guest bedroom, my laptop glowing in the dark, piecing together the puzzle. I created backups of every file, storing them in encrypted cloud accounts and on USB drives hidden around the house, one in a hollowed-out book, another taped beneath a drawer, a third entrusted to Maria. I was meticulous, paranoid even, but I couldn't afford to take chances. The Carters were ruthless, and I knew they'd fight back with everything they had. As the day of their return approached, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I'd spent 2 weeks building my case, transforming my fear into resolve. I wasn't the naive girl who'd married Ethan anymore. I was something else, something stronger, sharper, forged in the fire of their betrayal. I packed a suitcase, not out of defeat, but preparation. I wasn't sure what would happen when they returned, but I was ready. When the Carters returned from the Maldives, they were tan, smug, and insufferable. The foyer filled with the clatter of their designer luggage, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and arrogance. Margaret tossed her Louis Vuitton bag onto the floor, her eyes glinting with malice as she handed me the folder with the loan documents. "A little gift for you, Amelia," she said, her voice like poisoned honey. "You might want to start packing." I took the folder, my face calm, my hands steady. I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind 1,000 times, and I was ready. "Thank you, Margaret," I said, my voice soft but firm, a quiet blade hidden in silk. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the USB drive, its sleek black surface catching the light. "I have a gift for you, too." Her smirk faltered, a flicker of unease crossing her face, like a crack in her perfect facade. "What's that?" she asked, her tone sharp. I smiled, the kind of smile that hides a storm, the kind that promises reckoning. "Open it and find out." She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the drive as if sensing the danger. Then she snatched it and plugged it into her laptop, her movements brisk, dismissive. Ethan and Clara crowded behind her, their curiosity outweighing their suspicion. The screen flickered to life, and as the files loaded, Margaret's face drained of color, her tan fading to a sickly pallor. The security footage played first, showing Clara forging my signature in the study, her giggles echoing through the laptop's speakers. Margaret's voice followed, coaching her daughter. "Make the A loopier." Ethan's approving nod sealed their guilt. Then came the bank records, the emails, the contracts, the evidence of Margaret's tax evasion and fraud. Each file was a nail in their coffin, and they knew it. What is this?" Margaret stammered, her voice trembling, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "This," I said, stepping closer, my voice steady and unyielding, "is the end of your game. You thought you could ruin me, but you underestimated me. I've sent copies of this to my lawyer, a private investigator, and a journalist. If anything happens to me, or if you try to pin that loan on me, the world will know exactly who you are." Ethan tried to speak, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. "Amelia, wait. We can—" "Don't!" I cut him off, my voice like steel. "I'm done with you. All of you." Clara's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like a child caught stealing, her bravado gone. Margaret's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, but there was none. I'd built a cage of their own making, and they were trapped. I walked out of the house that day, my suitcase in hand, my head held high. But before I left, I served them with divorce papers and a lawsuit, delivered by a courier who arrived just as I stepped out the door. Sarah had filed charges against them for fraud, forgery, and tax evasion, her legal briefs as sharp as a guillotine. Lena's expose hit the front page the next morning, a scathing article titled, "The Carter Conspiracy, A Family's Fall from Grace." It detailed their crimes in damning detail, complete with screenshots of the security footage and excerpts from the emails. The authorities moved quickly, freezing their assets and raiding their offices. Victor was arrested within days, his Dubai project collapsing under the weight of scrutiny. The fallout was swift and brutal. Margaret faced trial, her reputation in tatters, her carefully curated image shattered. Clara fled to Europe, hoping to escape the scandal, but the press followed her, hounding her at every turn. Ethan sent me desperate texts, begging for forgiveness, promising to make things right. I blocked his number, deleting his words without reading them. I didn't need his apologies. I didn't need their money or their approval. I started over, using the skills I'd honed in the shadows of their world. With Sarah's help, I cleared my name and secured a settlement from the Carter estate, enough to start anew. I opened a small consulting firm, helping others navigate financial fraud, turning my pain into purpose. I hired Maria as my office manager, giving her the respect and stability the Carters never had. I bought a modest house by the coast, a white cottage with a porch overlooking the ocean. The sound of waves replaced the echoes of their cruelty, and the salt air cleansed the bitterness from my lungs. I kept in touch with my allies, Lena, who won an award for her expose, Tom, who checked in to make sure I was safe, James, who left the Carter firm to join my company. My mother visited often, her pride in me a quiet strength that anchored me. I rebuilt my life, piece by piece, on my terms. The last I heard, Margaret was still fighting her legal battles, her wealth dwindling with every court date. Clara was hiding in obscurity, her social media accounts silent. Ethan was a shell of the man he'd been, his charm faded, his empire gone. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Some victories don't require words. They're won in silence with a smile that says, I'm free.